How far we have not come, baby, is...
Oh, so I knew I'd get a rise out of you on
That's
that
so
one.
paternal when you speak in the pejorative way about women are not babies, and I resent the paternal attitude. However, in 1852, a Midwestern publisher published that women and blacks are inferior and will remain inferior until the end of time. In 1882, there was the first women's conference in Seneca Falls, New York. Here we are, 1920, as you suggested, we had the right to vote. And I take issue with the verbiage that is not women's verbiage. You said earlier on, we were granted. By whom? Men apparently have been granted divine right to vote, I guess from the Almighty, I'm not sure. And then at some time in the history of the land, they decided that they would allow women to vote. I take umbrage with that. I think that we should have had the right, obviously, from the time that that was preordained for men.
Okay, well, would you disagree?
I disagree.
You disagree? You don't want to vote?
Of course I want to vote, but I disagree with the feminist movement, per se.
Oh, all right.
Because I think it really teaches women to hate. I'm a Christian woman, and I don't think we should hate any group of people, especially not men. I think we should try and outsmart them out there in business. And I think I've done that. I mean, I'm in an all-male-dominated career. I sell airplanes to the Middle East and Africa. I didn't do it because someone called me baby and I resented it. I didn't. I just outsmarted them. Dale,
but how could you? You're intellectually inferior.
No, I'm not. And the whole point is,
good for
I just debated a man in Philadelphia who wrote a book called, I don't even want to plug his book, but he said women have different brains than men and we should all stay home. It was very difficult for me to debate him without slugging him in the, because he was really horrible about it.
Well, that's a male response, slugging him, right? I mean,
but we should always act like women. I mean, women are feminine.
I'm so tired of hearing that.
It's
silliness. It's silliness. We're talking
what is
about
silliness?
But we're talking about women being raped, being murdered. We're talking about serious things, and so I really choose not to talk about being feminine. That's a very singular position that women may or may not choose, and it's really beyond the scope of, I think, of this panel to talk about silly things like that. Now, you want to talk about compete with men on their level. In 1967, when women were not allowed to be what they call talent on the air in broadcasting, I was the first female disc jockey in the state of Connecticut. 1967. We're not talking, 100 years ago. In 1969, I was the first female broadcaster. I was an NBC anchor person.
Did you need the movement to do that, or was it because you were good?
It was by dint of my wanting to do it.
Or because you were in the movement?
We have come not far enough in 20 years. I have two female daughters. When I was going through
But you really
this...
didn't answer my question.
Well, let me make a cogent argument here.
Okay.
For 20 years, when this happened 20 years ago, I thought, well, this is difficult now, but if we prove ourselves, it's okay, let's go out and let's do the work and prove ourselves, and then we will have this full acceptance, and then we'll go on from there and everything will be fine. That just doesn't happen, and I'll tell you why that doesn't happen. Here's the argument. Men and women are constituted differently. It's like asking this chair to be an airplane. This chair is a chair and it has certain functions and it will do certain things. It will hold your body and so on and so on. What women historically, for the last 20 years, I find out, since we have made no progress at all, very little, we're asking men to do something that they are innately and inherently not allowed to do. Men are not going to give up power, and they're not going to give up money, i.e. the reason for the Federation.
First of all, I have to say that according to the Wall Street Journal, women control the percentage of the money in the United States. So we're talking about power.
Yeah, there you go.
It's incomprehensible that women represent 53% of the population, and that statistically is correct. We are 53% of the population.
But what you're suggesting is that further on down the line, women strike. Now, the Italian railroads do that every month. It hasn't worked for them. Why do you think it's going to work for you?
All right.
You consider this. The Italian railroads are men. You consider
Phyllis,
this.
We're going to let you and Dale jump in a minute, but now we're going to take a break, and I hope to be back.
Some of it, I think, is far out. And I think that those people who are far out do a disservice to it.
My opinion of women's lib, I'm against women's lib, basically. I feel that that women are better off at home, especially the economic conditions the way they are today.
I don't want to be liberated. I like being a mother and a housewife.
It makes a lot of sense to me because in a lot of cases, women just aren't given much respect,
I think it's great, and I think it's getting a lot of women together and getting them out of the houses.
No rights. I wouldn't give them a break.
Well, I really strongly support it.
Why?
should the woman always cook and why she should always, you know, wash dishes. You know, I mean, men could do that.
Well, I'm not belonging to it.
That's all right.
I'm very sorry I don't like it.
Well, yeah, I guess you don't have to apologize. I don't know. Last night I loaded the dishwasher. I don't know what that makes me. Dale Evans, Rogers, you were here. Has it come a long way since you and Buttermilk and Roy and Trigger and all that business? I'm sorry. I mean, that's part of your history. But it has come. Right. You've been around for a while. You've been
very long time.
But you have balanced something here.
You see, Scott, when I was in my teens, I could have been a flaming women's liberation member. Yeah, okay, because I had been hurt by my first husband, all right? And I was out to prove something. And I think many women today have that position, even if they won't admit it. They have been hurt. And so they say, no one will ever take advantage of me again. I'm going to prove myself. And I did. I mean, I tried to, but I was never happy. I have worked since I was 17 years old in offices, then in radio, then in pictures, with dance bands, nightclubs,
and
but
raised,
I never,
And raised how many children?
Well, we raised really 6. We've had 9 children, but we've lost 3. But you see, I always was afraid to trust a man. And I wanted to be independent. I didn't want to ask any quarter of any man. But you see, something wonderful happened to me in the spring of 1948, shortly after Roy and I were married. And I gave my life to Jesus Christ, and I was liberated in my spirit. True liberation.
All right.
Now, don't misunderstand me, Ross. I think what Andrea said, many of these things are really true. I do think that women deserve equal pay with a man with a job equally well done. The scriptures say, St. Paul said, you know, in God there is neither male nor female, Jew nor Greek. That's spelled out in the scriptures. But yet we have a different function from men. We are never going to be men. We are women. And, you know, like Roy says, thank the Lord.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm greatly encouraged by that, because I did marry a woman and I don't want her to be me.
That's exactly right.
All right, okay.
It's a trivial.
Well, may I get into this conversation?
You jump in, Phyllis, yes.
I think the whole argument is often pitched by the images and the ideology put forth by the feminist women's movement. And they have pretended to represent women, whereas in fact they only represent their narrow feminist ideology. And they have drawn these pictures that women were so oppressed and mistreated in this country. And they had their heyday in this country. They got the support of lots of politicians. They had almost unbridled sway in the media. And they reached their pinnacle in 1977 when they got $5 million of our American taxpayers' money under something called the Commission on International Women's Year. And they went down to Houston under Bella Abzug, and they purported to lay out the 25 demands of women. Now, they weren't speaking for women. They were just speaking for the radical feminists. But it laid out a definition of feminism that I think is what they are stuck with. And that is, they wanted total equality in everything, which meant their Equal Rights Amendment. They wanted abortion on demand, financed by the taxpayers. They wanted the whole panoply of gay and lesbian rights. And they wanted universal child care so that women could be relieved of their burden of having to take care of children, so that the government would do it. Now, everybody who's a known feminist was involved in that, and they all supported it, all the famous names that you've heard of. And they even had 3 first ladies down there, Lady Bird Johnson, Betty Ford, and Rosalind Carter. Now, that was their high point, and it's been all downhill ever since. When the American people got a look at what they meant and what they were after, the American people said no. And meanwhile, the pro-family women's movement has been steadily growing all the way, and it is manifested in the election of Ronald Reagan, his re-election, and now the recent election.
But you also say something else. You don't believe in comparative worth. You think it should happen in the marketplace, not government. But there is a lot of injustices when it comes to comparative worth in the marketplace, where that's my environment.
And so your solution is to have a bureaucrat or a judge set wages?
No, our solution is that women need to fight to get comparative wages.
Oh, but they're not just fighting for it. They want to use the power of government to do it.
I don't agree with that, but
I'm sure you will.
That we're not part of this union.
Yeah, but you said use the power of the marketplace. Sometimes the marketplace is unjust, and sometimes... Now, I saw
Indeed it is, but it's more just than any other system.
I saw one of your brochures, and you said, you talked about the nursing field. And you said, well, maybe it would be better just not to press it because they'll lay you off. I mean, that's a fair tactic the other way, isn't it?
I don't think I said that at all.
Well, you were talking about...
But I
if you
do
make
think...
too many waves, maybe... You won't be as good as you are now.
Nobody could ever accuse me of not making waves. I believe in making waves.
No, you were saying to the women nurses rather than go out.
All right, Andrea, you don't agree with
not
I mean, you're
one area.
No, I mean, is there one thing you agree with?
No, nothing. I have listened with incredulity, quite frankly, and I will take issue with Mrs. Schlafly's assumption, based, I think, on air, that the women's movement has had its heyday.
Excuse me, it's not the women's movement. It's the feminist women's movement, because we have the pro-family women's movement, and it's the one that's winning today.
Now,
I have difficulty with discerning and separating women's movement from pro-family movement, from whatever. What makes us think that women who are in the workplace, who insist on being treated with respect and not raped, and who would like child care so that they can go to work and not be in welfare, what makes us think that they are not pro-family? I mean...
Nobody said that. What we object to is the feminists defining themselves as women and excluding those of us who have different views.
I'm a feminist and I'm a woman, and I defy you or anybody else to suggest that I am not.
Can I just say one thing that I think will explain it? 110 degrees is not a comfortable temperature to live, nor is 30 below zero. But if you can walk around in about 60 degrees, not take life so seriously that every word a man says to you, you tear up him as a feminist against the feminist movement. I mean, not taking yourself so seriously, but walk around in a pleasurable atmosphere where both you know that you have talents, go out and earn them. No movement made me successful in the business world.
You don't seem to understand that women have done that for the last 20 years, thinking that that's exactly what the result would be, that we will prove ourselves and then we will be essentially equal. It has not happened, and it won't happen.
So how do you say we should do it? Take it, right?
Essentially, yes. Let me just say...
Hitler had the same idea.
I hate to trivialize things. You know, these little one-liners that you throw out really make it very trivial. It's a very serious thing. We're talking about children.
It is a serious thing that you say take it by force.
You have to understand that there are two systems at work in the species. We have the intellectual side. We are thinking people, so men and women think. Then we have an emotional side. That's part and parcel of men's makeup and women's makeup. So that when the crisis situation comes, it's to be determined whether or not the intellectual part, the thinking part, will take over and make rational judgments based on the scenario at the time, or whether the emotional side will take over. It's my personal contention. Now, this has nothing to do with the United Federation of Women. This is just something that I personally believe. That what degree of civility have we reached? Are we still not murdering people, killing babies around the world? There are conflicts. There's the Israeli thing and there's the Irish thing. So what degree of civility have we reached? And I still think that men are reacting emotionally. They say women are emotional. I dare say that men are not.
Excuse me.
Okay, when we come back, we're going to try not to be emotional, and we'll allow them to talk. We'll be right back. They're demonstrating there, I would imagine this is in the 1920s, for women's suffrage and demonstrating for the right to vote, so forth. It would have made a difference this year if the women couldn't have voted, because would George Bush be president?
Of course he would.
I see.
I think so.
Absolutely.
Well, there may be a number of Democratic women who disagree with you.
The men were for George Bush.
No, the majority of women voted for Bush.
What do women look for in male leadership anymore?
They want a man. They don't want a wimp.
That's right.
Will a woman ever be president of the United States?
Oh, she may be. When she goes through the whole trials of stomping through the snows of Iowa and New Hampshire, offers herself to the voters, and the voters choose her. We believe in the democratic process.
Yeah, well,
we don't
one
believe
of the strongest leaders in the Western world democracy today is, of course, Margaret Thatcher.
I was going to say, she's done a beautiful job, and Golda Meir did too.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay, you have somebody back here in the statement. Go ahead. Yes. Stand up so we can see you. There you are.
Hello.
You are presently in a condition that would be impossible for man biologically to realize, aren't you? In that you are pregnant. No, I mean, is it okay for women to have children? I mean, if all you guys, if all the women just rose up and said, we're going to be, everything we're going to be, would be all right for women to be pregnant. Because if not, that's the end of the human race. Pardon me?
You're not looking at me.
No, okay, let's, Andrea, are you a mother as well?
Oh, I am, yes. I have a 26 and a 24-year-old daughter.
All right, and all of you are mothers?
Yes, I have 6 children.
And I'm a grandmother 2 days ago.
Go ahead.
I'm a great one.
All right.
I thought that Diane asked Andrea a really interesting question, and I'd really like you to answer it. She asked you, what does the feminist movement want to do to change what's going on that you feel is unfair in the workplace? She said, why not just go out and do the best job you can? You said women have been doing that and we're not getting anywhere. But you didn't answer her question. You went off with the Israelis.
You're right.
Would you answer that?
I'd be delighted. Thank you for asking, and you're right. I apologize. The United Federation of Women feels that the only way for us to have what it is that we need to function as women in this society is to take what it is we need, since it has been determined in our view that it will not be forthcoming. We have asked and begged and cajoled and pleaded, and it's not forthcoming. So our position is simply this, that at some appropriate time when the numbers in the ranks swell, this is a new organization, when the numbers in the ranks swell, we're going to have to, without rancor, without animosity, we're just going to have to say, if you will not address our needs, the things that we have to have, then we will be in favor of a nationwide boycott of goods and services for a day, if that's what it takes, because we've determined that asking and begging and pleading doesn't make it. 20 years worth of work, being in the workplace and showing what we can do so that they would trust us professionally, that doesn't do it either. That's why we've determined that the difference in the evolution and the inherence.
Can I finish answering that question too? Begging and pleading does not get us ahead in the business place. Working harder, staying longer hours, learning our jobs.
Naive. That is so naive.
It is not naive because it's worked for me and it's worked for a lot of other women I know. If you're a 9-to-5er and you don't give 100%, you don't get 100%. We shouldn't just get it because we're feminists. We should get it because we're good.
Amen. Rather, I mean, isn't it? Are you saying, Andrea, that that you should realize these benefits out of demand rather than earning the right to do that?
No, I'm saying if women work to the millennium to prove to the other half of the species that we are capable, competent work partners, workmates, it's not going to change our position. Statistically, women in the corporation in the last 20 years, we have risen in the ranks corporately, but they reach a plateau and they will never be CEOs. I shouldn't say never, never, never.
Well, you're CEO. Let me answer that.
Women in sales is a different situation.
We believe in equal opportunity. We do not believe in enforced equal results. Now, we have had equal pay for equal work as the law of our land with the enforcement mechanism since 1963. That's 25 years. But it has not produced the same number of women as CEOs and lawyers because women make other choices in their lives. And the majority of women continue to have children. And children require a lot of care. Women look at their job as something that is temporary. They do not look at it with the 60-hour-a-week commitment year after year, as men do, who become CEOs and top-flight lawyers and doctors.
In terms of law of the land, I mean, the civil rights was a law of the land for over 100 years before Martin Luther King made a move to polarize that movement and call it up
No, that's really not true. It was the civil rights law of 1964 that changed much of the law of this country. And likewise in the employment law, it was...
What would have happened if Martin Luther King hadn't done what he had done? I mean, which was to demonstrate and do what...
I've had a personnel consulting firm for 25 years. Equal pay, just because it's on the statute and it's a law, doesn't always work.
Right. Well, I agree. All right. Rhinelander, Wisconsin, you are on Straight Talk.
Hello. Thank you. I'm calling to
talk as the perspective of an 18-year-old person who grew up with a mother and aunts and grandparents who believed in the feminist movement. My grandmother pushed me and told me to get straight A's and to work real hard to kind of prove to people what I could do. And my mother divorced because she always thought that she was right. She had abortions because she didn't want more children. She wanted to have control of her life at all times. She was really into psychology and the whole feminist deal, and so did my aunt. So I'm calling to tell you that destroys children, and it's destroying my generation. I had to grow up and raise myself because my mother's career was so important to her, and I was left alone at home. I had to make my own meals in second and third and first grade, and that left me vulnerable to men in the community who abused me or people in the neighborhood. And I had to, I thought this behavior was right. I thought living together was okay. I thought universal reproductive freedom was the way to go. And I thought that, that careers was the number one thing. I always had this dream from second grade that I was going to be married or not married, have a daughter of my own, and I was going to be some kind of super mom, wonderful career person. And this got me hurt. I was pregnant at 14 years old, and now I have a 3-year-old daughter. And when I was pregnant, I considered abortion, and I ran into some sidewalk counseling birthright people, and that changed my life. They told me that I had self-worth in motherhood. They told me that I had self-worth in family. And I'm all for equal pay for equal work. I know how hard it is, but let me tell you, motherhood is really hard. At 18 years old, it's the best thing I ever did. I had a 4.0 grade average. I graduated with my daughter at my graduation, and it's great.
Okay, well, thank you for calling. She may be a microcosm of this generation. Go ahead.
Scott, we have a generation of children that are really suffering from not having real home life. I mean, and women have been encouraged to leave the home and sort of made to feel inferior if they opted to be a wife and mother.
All right.
And we're reaping the whirlwind. And some women, I think, are really cut out to be career women, and they're gifted that way. But if you can do both, if you can be a career woman and not shortchange your children or your husband or your home, well and good, but it is a gigantic task.
All right, and we'll be back and we'll talk more about this. Is the woman's place in the home? Should she go back there? What are we doing to our society by the women going out into the workplace? We'll be right back. All right. Not many of you, of course, have experienced the history of a life similar to Dale Evans Rogers' life. She unique in the sorts of things that she experienced as a younger woman. We went back into the archives and we dug around a little bit to see what we come up with. So let's look now a little bit of the history of Dale Evans Rogers.
I'm a little worried. Better put in a call to headquarters for me. I'll take it here.
Surely. Operator, long distance, please. It'll be a minute. San Angelo Lodge.
This is Captain Moffat's office calling, Roy Rogers.
Just a minute, please. That's a coincidence, Mr. Rogers. Here's headquarters calling you.
That is a coincidence. I'll take it. Hello?
This is Captain Moffat's secretary speaking. The captain isn't in right now, but he asked me to tell you that Lee Madison would be unable to come to San Angelo.
What happened?
She was sick. I mean, his mother was ill.
I don't think you're telling me the truth, Miss, whatever your name is. But you sound like somebody who needs a good spanking.
What? Well, you certainly aren't the one that's going to give it to me. And furthermore, I think you're the rudest man I ever met in my life.
And I think you're the nosiest girl. You ought to have more respect for other people.
I give people respect when they deserve respect, and you certainly don't.
Well, just the same, the next time headquarters calls me, make sure you're not on the other end of the line, because I never want to talk to you again. Hello, Miss Madison.
Oh, you...
Okay, a little slice of life. That wasn't a movie. That's their home. That's the way they carry it.
No, it's not either, Scott. It isn't. Now,
No,
Roy,
I'm kidding.
Listen,
But you're
Roy has
feisty.
the last
You're
word
feisty.
in our home.
He does?
He says you can always tell a Texan, but not much.
Okay,
But he has the last word.
Practical stuff. When you get to an impasse on a decision, you really feel strongly about doing something, and Roy's saying, no, no, and what do you do with that?
I let it rest for a little bit and let him think about it. Okay? And as a rule, you know, sometimes I'm overruled and sometimes he thinks that I'm right. But I don't try to pressure, I don't try to boss Roy. Because, you know, we were created to be helpmeets for a man, okay?
Yeah.
And now let me tell you something. When I'm gone, when I'm traveling like this, Roy keeps his own house, all right? He washes his dishes so they're not piled up when I get home, all right? Whoever gets up first makes the coffee in the morning. We have a joint bank account. I have another bank account. He has another one, but we have a family bank account. And really and truly, we're partners. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the way it ought to be in a marriage.
Okay, all right. Well, I don't. Boy, it's hard for me to feature one of my heroes, Roy Rogers, washing dishes. But go ahead.
You know, one thing I've always wondered, I've been in broadcasting for 11 years now, and at 18 years old, I went to college but was involved in television and radio sports. At 18 years old, I never would call myself liberated or a feminist or anything, but I was at the point where I wanted to prove to men that a woman could be in the sports world. Well, I did, and I did the whole locker room scene, and, you know,
what do you mean by that?
Well, one of 3 women in Seattle, Washington, that walked into the NFL locker rooms with men in the buff. I mean, I thought I was going to prove that I could do what the men did. But to me, it was a slap in my own face because I really wasn't doing what I really wanted to do. And I'm still in broadcasting. But one thing I've always wondered, and it's my own difficulty too, is why do women think they have to be men or try to be men? They're denying their own gifts in a lot of things, what they really want to do, but they feel as though, and maybe it's being the oldest daughter and not having any brothers and trying to walk in daddy's footprints. I don't know, but I've seen so many women go into jobs that they're not good at because they want to prove to men that they can do the job.
Yeah. Andrea, what about it?
Yeah,
I mean, are we
real good.
are you trying to be a man? Do you want to be a man?
I keep hearing that, and I genuinely, this is not a rhetorical question, it's an interrogatory. What is it when you say that we would like to be men? I have really no concept. Could someone explain that to me?
I can explain. This young lady said she was doing it to prove it to men. What you need to do in a career path is do it to prove it to yourself.
Yeah. Answer my question, could you please?
All right.
When they say that we're trying to be men, I have no concept of what that means. I'm trying to be human. I'm trying to work. I'm trying to get equal pay. I'm trying to be a loving parent to daughters. I'm trying to be a proper United States citizen. I'm trying to pay my taxes. I'm trying to
wear corrective shoes and slacks, and they try and look masculine.
So I guess I'm okay because I have a short skirt.
I didn't say you were okay. You said you were okay. It's important that you say you're okay.
All right.
You know, it's so rigid. You have such a rigid, narrow view.
You go ahead.
My question is for Mrs. Lynn, or Ms. Lynn.
Andrea will be fine.
Andrea.
Yes.
Mary Daly, the Catholic theologian, said that women would not really be free until patriarchal religion was overthrown and Yahweh and Jesus Christ were left lying in the dust. She advocated the God the Mother concept. I want to know, Andrea, to what extent patriarchal religion needs to be overthrown so that you can be free and so that women can be free across America?
Good, very good question. I think when and if the patriarchal attitude toward religion and its genesis toward women is ever, I don't like the word overthrown because that evokes some kind of vicious situation. But if we can have a coalescence, if we can have an equality, I think then that I, for one, I hate to get it down to singular terms, I, for one, then would, again, believe in some kind of religion, which I do not at this moment, after having been raised in a very parochial home, having attended convent schools all of my life, and having had an apostolic blessing upon my marriage. It's the rigidity that doesn't work. It's living in a realm that is outside of reality. I agree. The language that we as humans use, men and women, is a male-oriented language. And the patriarchal attitude of religion is, I think, very devastating to women because it denies us any equality.
Phyllis?
Well, I think we've come now to a lot of the core of feminism. Mm-hmm. Feminism is an ideology, and if you read their chief spokesman, Gloria Steinem and Betty Friedan and all the rest of them, it is an attack on society, it's an attack on religion, it's an attack on the family, it's an attitude toward life where they wake up in the morning with a chip on their shoulder, believing that somebody has been in a conspiracy against women. We're not sure whether it's God or Mother Nature or a conspiracy of male chauvinist pigs. And then their solution originally was that they want sameness of treatment. They want gender never to be an identification or a reason for a choice between this and that. And that is simply out of accord with reality. And the American people rejected that. But really the bottom line is what happens to the children.
Amen.
A lot of women have bought the feminist notions, but now that we have grandchildren, it is clear to me that children have not heard the call of women's liberation. They are exactly the same as they were 30, 50, 100 years ago, and they are not changing. And babies need mothers.
I'd like to say something.
Babies need fathers as well.
I've raised two, by myself, two wonderful children. I have known the Lord for 6 years. My business and my whole happiness, it turned my life around 6.5 years ago when I know Jesus found me a long time ago, but I found him 6.5 years ago. That is true liberation, as Dale said, and that's happiness.
Oh, I have so many questions, but these women won't let me talk. Let's go ahead. Boulder, Colorado, you've been on the line. Go ahead. You're on Straight Talk. Boulder?
Okay, thank you, Scott.
Yes, ma'am.
This is Josiane from Niwot, Colorado. I had a job one time where I was supposed to be getting equal pay. Okay, that's a joke. The men were making $1 more an hour than I was, and I went and asked the manager why. And I said, I'm doing the very same work. I'm doing the very same thing that all the men are doing. As a matter of fact, I may be even working a little harder. And he looked around and he says, I tell you what, he says, don't push the button for the compactor. That gave them $1 more an hour. Okay? But my point is the Proverbs 31 woman, you know, she had servants to help her do the mundane things of the world. But she was, to me, a super mom. But through everything that she did, she worked outside of the home. She had things that she did, and she sold them. And her
she bought a field. She was in real estate.
Right. She was in real estate. She had her vineyard that she planted. She had her garden. Okay. Now, she was really, truly a super mom. But the point of Proverbs 31 is that she put her family first.
That's all right.
And to me, that's the whole thing. I'm really upset over how little women care for their children nowadays. The fact that abortion is so prevalent.
Okay, well, thank you for your call. So point well taken.
Yes,
Andrew.
May I correct?
Correct what?
Perhaps a misconception in the marketplace, albeit Ms. Schlafly's comment. I would just like to say that if I am representative of the feminist movement, I'm not sure that I am. I'm Andrea LYNNE. But if I am, I'd just like to let everybody know that I'm a very happy person.
You would still be who you are without a movement, because the movement isn't an organization as much as it is an attitude or an organism.
Type anti-female things wish to paint a picture and a portrait of some really bitter old nasty old women, and we're basically very happy people. We don't want to be men. We don't want to be with anything. We want to be whatever way it is we are.
How many children do you have?
I have 2.
And male, female?
I have 2 daughters, and one is 26, and she's in graduate school in Vermont, and my second daughter's in law school.
How much time did you spend with them when they were growing up? in their growing up years. Let's say at the height of the women's movement, 10, 11...
Very good question. And a very good question. And well, to get into your situation, she wants to talk about guilt in a moment. Let me answer that question. How much time did I spend? When I was going through it, being a working woman, sole support of 2 children, upper middle income, who had to have... I wanted them to have tennis lessons and Caribbean vacations every Christmas and private schools and so on. That was what I wanted. So I had to work a lot to make that money to do that. So when I was going through it, I thought, oh, my word, I'm not here enough. In retrospect, I recognized that any of my off hours were devoted to the children. Any off hour I had, any nights, any weekends, any holidays were quality time with the children, and it was okay because they're fine.
I want to talk about quality time for children. You know, I've traveled all over the world. I've missed birthdays. We've had to make up birthdays. And I used to always, my friends used to say, don't you feel guilty about it? You know, I never did, because we used to sit and have weekly meetings to decide whether I should go or not. They totally felt loved. But I go to Bible seminary, and what I learned something interesting in this Doctrine of Salvation course, that guilt is a condition of original sin. It is not a feeling. And you shouldn't have guilt if you know the Lord.
Phyllis, you raised your children for, I mean, how many, 5, 6 children?
I have 6 children.
And then...
I certainly was a full-time mother for 25 years while I was raising them. And that's what I believe in. Mm-hmm. And I kept them all at home until I entered them in school in the 2nd grade. I taught them all to read at home.
I respect the fact that she stayed home to raise them. I really do, truly.
And I object to the notion of calling employed women working women,
yes,
and not talking about mothers as working women. I object to the semantics very much.
Okay, I mean, keeping home and family is a legitimate career, isn't it?
It is the best career for a woman to have.
That very well may be, but it should be one of your choosing. And why do people get together? Why are they so threatened? Why are they trying to deny people who are outside of that sphere, who think perhaps a different way? What is so frightening about it?
But what would you have done, Phyllis, if you didn't have the support of a husband and you had all those children? You would have had to go to work full time.
Of course. You cope with the circumstances that life dishes out to you.
And then somebody would be saying to you, Ms. Schlafly, why didn't you stay home with your children?
No, I don't think so. I'm not criticizing somebody else, but I do object to the semantics of the women's movement. I object to the semantics of the working woman and the non-working woman. And I object to the notion that society must provide for children in institutions as opposed to in the home. I object to that very much.
Okay, go ahead.
One thing that I worry about is that with most of the women working now and getting equal pay for equal money, my wife is forced to work as a consequence. I think the marketplace is adjusted for that. Yep. And now she can't stay home even if she wanted to. And what's going to happen with the kids now, because she's not going to be able to stay home with her kids, and who's going to raise them? The state?
There's not equal pay for equal work out there most of the time. That is not reality.
Oh yes, it is reality. Now, let me answer that.
I'm in the marketplace. I'm in the personnel field. I feel I have experience to say that it's not equal.
Those who have a complaint can file them. You have your complaint taken care of within 60 days. I would never say that any lawyer, that any law is perfectly obeyed, because there are always law violators. But we have remedies to deal with the law violators. What these people are asking, they are asking for equal pay, even though they don't do equal work. And we are not for that. We believe in equal opportunity, but
there
we do not believe
many
in
young
equal
marrieds
results
out there in their early 30s.
And talking about the young people out there, there are 16 million full-time homemakers who are taking care of their own children and who are getting along on a lower median income than the two-earner families.
Okay, we'll be right back. Equal time here for a man, St. Paul, Minnesota. Go ahead. You're on Straight Talk.
Good morning.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make one statement and one question for your panel. The statement is, I believe in equal pay for equal work. If, say, as a computer operator, a female with the same amount of experience should be paid the same. But the question is, on this comparative worth, as a computer operator, I don't know why a secretary, per se, should be paid the same amount on comparative worth, as both are highly useful positions within a company, but hardly interchangeable. And if your panel could address this question,
I'd like to answer that question. What he's asking is this notion that people should compare completely different jobs, like the secretary and the truck driver, or the nurse and the plumber, and have some government commission say that they both have the same number of points. Therefore, the employer should be ordered to pay the same pay to both of them. Now, that is a very subjective decision. If you think the secretary is worth the same as the truck driver, you ask the truck driver, he's going to have a different view. So it always gets into court. And you, in effect, would have wages set by government employees or evaluators or judges instead of by the marketplace.
I'd like to come from a different point of view. Because sewer workers and truck drivers and people like that do a job are paid $21 an hour, ridiculous amounts of money. Maybe a secretary isn't paid as much, but I'm going to tell you there's a word in here that Phyllis hasn't talked about, and that's union. We got that high in a lot of these respects because of union, which makes us not competitive in the world market for our products. Therefore, we all talk about the deficit. That is a reason for the deficit.
Well, that is a reason, but we're not about to outlaw unions.
Okay, go ahead.
I think there's a tremendous amount of heartache in women today. We've been talking about the ideology of feminism, but there's practical problems that are insurmountable. Half of the marriages end in divorce, and so we have women with children whose husbands are hardly paying enough for them to wear the clothes that their friends wear at school. And so what about that?
Indeed.
What about the practicality of that?
Divorce is a terrible problem, and the women's liberation movement went across this country in the 1970s, and they changed the state laws to allow for this easy, no-fault divorce, so that one spouse can terminate the marriage without the consent of the other.
This is the world according to Phyllis Schlafly,
and that has brought
just
about
doesn't exist.
economic devastation to women.
I don't know.
Because on the average, when a divorce happens, a woman's standard of living goes down 73%, and the man's goes up 42%.
Also,
and that's directly attributable to the feminist movement.
50% of the people that have to pay child care, the men to the women, are not paying it in this country.
Right.
I guess she's suggesting that from time immemorial, then, before the women's movement, we didn't have any rape. We didn't have any men leaving women. We didn't have any alcohol.
What does
blaming everything? She just said it's the women's movement. That's why we're having divorces.
I just said they gave us the change in the divorce laws.
All right, Dale, jump in here. What were you going to say?
To me, the bottom line is what happens to the children.
Right.
Today's children. What happens to our children? Every child deserves a home. And every child deserves to be taught of God. This nation was founded upon Judeo-Christian ethics. And God help us if we don't continue to teach our children the moral law contained therein. And so to make a woman feel she's second class if she opts to be a mother and a wife and raise her children, to me, is totally wrong.
Yeah. All right. We are down to the bottom line, as Dale said. Phyllis, your response to this, where do you see the women's movement is going, if it's going anywhere?
Scott, I'm trying to teach you. There is no the women's movement. There is a feminist women's movement, and there is a pro-family women's movement. And that is manifested through their legislative and policy goals, and the pro-family women's movement is winning.
All right. Go ahead. Go ahead. And also, we have DIANE Lewis has written a book, Equal to the Challenge, How Working Women Can Avoid Errors That Limit Their Careers. You've walked the tightrope. Somehow you're balancing it all out, eh?
I really am, and I think, the feminist movement, the pro-family movement, somewhere in the middle, there should be a balance. Somewhere in the middle, where women aren't made to feel guilty working, and they're not made to feel guilty staying home and being a housewife and mother.
Amen.
Andrea?
So much to say. That young gentleman was correct. Today, most young mothers do not have a choice. They have to work. There were reasons for that. They're leeching the deficit. The Japanese own 1/3 of our debt. We're $600 billion in debt, working toward $1 trillion. Thank you, the Reagan administration. It's not as simple. It's a very complex picture.
Blaming Reagan on the whole debt?
It would be nice if we could have cooperation rather than polarization. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time.
Straight Talk is a presentation of the 700 Club. Views expressed by guests are not necessarily...